When I look out my window, there are so many things to see. When I look out my window, there are stories that nobody but me knows. This is the story of Joe. Joe was a fisherman and he liked to fish. Joe decided this one weekend that he was going to travel up the coast of Western Australia to his favourite fishing spot. It had been hot and dusty and he'd worked hard all year, and summer was here and it was fading fast, so he decided that this was his last opportunity to get away from Perth, to drive up the coast and to get to his special spot that nobody else knew about. Joe looked forward to it and planned it down to the last fishing rod, packed his old Ford van up and hit the road and headed north. Joe was really looking forward to this adventure. He'd planned it for months, and he just could see himself sitting on the beach, enjoying life, finally away from the maddening crowds, from the tedious work day after day, sitting in the office, listening to drivel. And just the mere thought of catching a fish was just making Joe feel so good. I mean, after all, that's what most fishermen feel, isn't it? The hours went by and it became monotonous. Joe's legs were straining and his arms were getting tired from holding the steering wheel. He was thirsty and the bugs were getting in the car, starting to get annoying. So he decided to pull over and have a bit of a break, have a coffee break, he said to himself. He only had about an hour left to go and it was starting to get dusk and those damn kangaroos were everywhere, jumping across the road like they do. Anyway, Joe pulled up and found himself a nice spot, got out, stretched his legs, farted a bit like men do. And he looked around at the scenery and thought, geez, isn't the countryside just beautiful? He could smell the salt air in the distance and knew that it was only about a matter of an hour or so before he'd reach his destination. And he could barely wait. He had to set up the tent and do other things, so he thought he'd just have a bit of a break first before he got there. And that was Joe's mistake. It was getting dark and the stars were coming out. Joe was starting to feel tired, and so he went and got his flask of coffee and poured himself a drink. He also decided to have a bit of a cigarette as well, even though he knew it was no good for him. Anyway, Joe leant against the side of the car and looked out across the bush, looking for kangaroos and whatever wildlife might be out there. And he enjoyed the silence. Only a West Australian can know when you're up in that red dirt looking around for a kangaroo or two. Anyway, Joe relaxed and wasn't paying a lot of attention until something caught his eye. In the distance he could see a light flashing. He thought, what the hell is that? Is it a plane? What is it? So he looked up and tried to see what it was, but he couldn't make it out, no matter how he tried. But the light kept coming closer and closer and closer. And Joe began to feel disturbed. What the hell is it? He said to himself. That's no aeroplane. What is it? So Joe strained and put his hand up to his face to try and see, but the light just was shining brighter and brighter and brighter, blinding him. And he could hear a whirring sound, but it didn't sound like a plane or a helicopter. And again, Joe said to himself, what the hell is that? What is it? And he became disturbed. And he thought to himself, I think I better get back in the car because whatever this is It isn't normal. It isn't human-made. Well, he didn't think it was, unless it was a technology of some kind that the Australian government or those Americans had been testing. But he wasn't going to hang around to see. He decided it was time to get on and get to his little camping spot where no one else knew about. Anyway, Joe jumps in the car, he spins the wheel, and he takes off like a bat out of hell. Off he goes down the road, but he couldn't seem to lose the light. It was on his tail. Joe pushed his foot to the floor and he hammered that bloody old Ford for all he was worth. On he went, harder and faster, but he couldn't shake that damn light. It was stayed on his tail. He could feel his heart starting to beat, the fear go up, the tension in his neck. And he was like, my God, what is it? What is following me? And he started to panic. And he drove harder and faster, but he couldn't get away from the light. No matter what Joe tried, he just couldn't get away. Even though his foot was to the floor, the muscles in his neck were tense, his fingers were gripping the steering wheel, and he was screaming, whatever you are, leave my Ford alone. But the light just continued on. And then suddenly he started to feel the old Ford lift up the back wheels off the ground, and the light was sucking him in. And he screamed, God help me! I'm being abducted by an alien. Joe was terrified. He thought about probes. He thought, what are they going to do to me? And what's worse, what are they going to do to my Ford? So he screamed for all he was worth, let go, you bastards! Let go of me! And suddenly, fortunately, Joe's car dropped to the ground. And with that, he spun the wheels and took off once again, veering left and right across the road, trying to keep out of the tracks of this light that kept coming towards him again. Joe screamed for all he was worth, let go, you bastards, let go! And he took off, veering into the bush. He knocked a kangaroo or two, but Joe didn't care. He was going to escape no matter what. His poor old Ford had to wear a kangaroo or two in his desperate attempt to escape. He did everything a good old Aussie bloke could do, but he just couldn't get away. Once again, the car went up on an angle, backside first. Joe screamed for all he was worth, God help me, save me, somebody. I don't want to be probed. But poor old Joe got probed anyway. And the next thing you know, he found himself on the beach in his favourite spot and wondered if it had all just been a dream. No, Joe, you got probed.